holding back or you're gonna get us both killed.
You have no idea what I've been through!
Don't think! Act! You need to fight like a Viltrumite!
How much I've been holding back!
You're not your dad, Mark.
I'll never let anyone ever hurt my family! I thought you were strong.
Mark Grayson used to think he wanted to be just like his dad. Yeah, he changed his mind on that quick. And since that dark day, he strived to be the exact opposite of his father. Someone who doesn't use his power to torment others. Someone who would never take a life. And although he got pushed to the edge more and more throughout this second season, he always held back. He never broke that secret promise he made to himself until...
When are you coming home?
This is it! Invincible Season 2 comes to a close with this explosive 8th episode, I Thought You Were Stronger. Adapting a huge turning point in the story that a lot of fans have been waiting for, comic readers or not. Mark finally has his multiversal showdown with Angstrom Levy, who might have lost the battle, but won the war, as he succeeds in his goal in making Mark and the entire Grayson family hurt, dealing emotional damage that's going to follow Mark for a very, very long time. Even if he had to take a lot of hits in the process. Like, a lot. There's a lot to talk about, so let's waste no time and dive in. It wouldn't be Invincible if they didn't keep us on the edge of our seats. So instead of picking up on that tense cliffhanger, we open with Nolan seemingly pulling off a prison break, tearing apart guards of both the robotic and organic variety. And although I'm sitting here hooting and hollering, this felt way too good to be true. And sure enough, Krieg enters the scene to confirm that this was actually an inspection, testing if Nolan is at full strength before his execution. I'll have some words for Krieg and the whole of Viltrum later, but I really dig how this cold open subverted expectations while also showing us how far we've come from the last season finale. Nolan evolving from your average emotionally repressed Viltrumite on a mission of intergalactic conquest, killing people at the drop of a hat just to make a point to his son, to becoming an outcast in the Viltrum Empire for wanting to spare innocent lives. He's slowly becoming in tune with his emotions and realizing that Viltrum is in the wrong. Although he's clearly not all the way there, accepting his execution as not only is he outnumbered, but also because a part of himself genuinely believes that his empathetic worldview means he's broken. Facing death is easier to him than outright confronting Viltrum's deeply flawed system. But back to subverting expectations, I didn't expect the final title card drop of the season to go to a random jogger named Taylor, trying to get his life together as Mark lands behind him. I was curious if this was like a character who becomes relevant in the future or something, but nope, just some guy. As was expected, the title card has broken out of its shell and is now fully black and blue, although we won't get Mark's new look until next season. Gotta have a new costume to usher in a new chapter of his life and also stand out in the Invincible War that all the cool kids are hyping up. Now, Angstrom Levy didn't just show up without a plan. He was very prepared for how this night would go down, blocking Mark off from all contact so that Cecil and GDA can't interfere. Not to mention, the way he's holding Debbie hostage, grabbing onto the back of her neck, is identical to how one of the other Invincibles killed Angstrom's son in another universe. He truly wants Mark to feel all the pain and suffering he felt in every universe, down to the last minute detail. The way Mark doesn't remember him initially kinda reminds me of Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Max getting all offended in the middle of Times Square that Peter didn't recognize him after bro fell into a vat of super eels. Like, no shit, I'm not gonna recognize you when you got deep fried into an abomination. I also can help but notice how Debbie being caught in a hostage situation and Amber being caught in a hostage situation is like night and day. The settings, how they respond, and how the situation ends for the both of them. Amber was held hostage while the two were out in a public setting, surrounded by people. Debbie's being held hostage in her own home, with Oliver being the only other person around. Whereas Anissa didn't really seem to care about Amber being Mark's girlfriend, and more so just wanted to grab his attention, referring to Amber as just this woman. Angstrom deliberately went for the jugular and sought after Mark's family. He really wanted to hit him where it hurts. It highlights the spectrum of threats the superhero life can attract in the world of Invincible. Entire empires where the soldier threatening your girlfriend is just another cog in the machine, and adversaries that wield an unfathomable amount of power, but only want to use that power for their own personal vendettas. And both threats, despite being on opposite ends of the spectrum, can easily endanger the people you love. Amber was someone who was not prepared or compatible with the superhero world at all, thus she completely froze up and could barely get a sentence out under the immense fear she felt. But she also walked away unscathed. I mean, she's gonna have nightmares for weeks, but she's uninjured. Meanwhile, Debbie is someone who had a lot of time to prepare for and adjust to the superhero world, having plenty of exposure to it even after Nolan went AWOL. So she proceeds with caution, but isn't afraid to stand her ground and speak her mind. She doesn't fear Levy, and like William, she isn't afraid to throw hands. She spent all season dealing with the aftermath of being stripped of her agency, and she won't let it happen again. Sadly, despite drawing blood and nearly escaping, she's quickly reminded that at the end of the day, she's out of her depth. Still, this makes me wonder how different things might have been between Mark and Amber if he disclosed his secret identity from the jump. If she had a chance to become familiar with the superhero world like Debbie. If she got to know Cecil and Donald and the rest of the Guardians. Would she have been more combative against Anissa? And would she have been able to adapt to the superhero world? Or would things have fallen apart all the same, if not turn out worse? I gotta say though, despite Anissa's appearance running the risk of things turning into Chicago 2.0, this situation feels way more intense. Partially because Mark just broke up with Amber, who had a near-death experience, but also because Oliver is around. When Levy threw him across the room, I gasped, bro. A baby getting flung shouldn't be this stressful in a cartoon where a fraction of the team just got bored and shot in the head. The beginning of this battle between Mark and Angstrom is less of a fight and more of a chance to dabble in multiverse shenanigans. And I can't lie, it was a lot of fun. A nice reminder that you can keep this concept fresh as long as you're ready to get wild and weird with it. At first, Mark ends up in what might as well be the Land Before Time movies, a universe where dinosaurs survived prehistoric ages instead of humans. They also speak perfect English. Then Mark rubs shoulders with the spectacular, great value Spider-Man, voiced by my favorite Spidey, Josh Keaton, who's caught in his own climactic showdown with Provoc, who visually feels like a mix of Doc Ock and Galactus. Is it just me? It's mainly the helmet. This little cameo, if you want to call it that, was a long time coming, as this scene is based off the opening of Marvel Team Up Volume 314, where Invincible does indeed crash a fight between the Web-Slinger and Doc Ock. Although they have a whole-ass adventure that was never going to have time to be depicted here. This comic could be spotted on the table in Season 2's teaser, you know, the one with the fancy animation. So between this and Josh Keaton being listed as a guest for the season, fans quickly put 2 and 2 together, eagerly awaiting the wall crawler's appearance ever since. Now, working legal shit out with Disney is always going to feel like a tall order, so if you ask me, this was probably the best outcome. I'm just glad they were able to pull something off either way. Although I feel for fans who are going to be disappointed that they didn't actually get to see Mark and Peter team up in animated form. I love how Mark kinda judges Spidey right off the bat, asking if he's trying to hurt that old man, like he isn't also a young adult superhero squaring up with some dude who's pushing 40. It's the little things that make Invincible what it is. Calling out the absurdity of so many comic book staples, like how Mark puts Batman on the spot for his name a few moments later.
And your name is... well... you know, I mean, like, don't you think that's kind of lazy?
Willful ignorance has been a big theme this season, coming to a head with Donald finding out that he had his mind wiped of all 39 deaths he endured. But I think Angstrom Levy really encapsulates this theme in this episode. He betrayed his own morals and has clearly become the villain of his own story. Yet he's deluded himself into believing he's the hero, and that Mark has to be the villain in every universe, despite Oliver's mere existence proving him wrong. He notes that Oliver only exists in this reality, but that's only because this is the only universe where Mark stood up to his dad, which led to Omni-Man having a moment of self-reflection and of change of heart. Mark standing up to his his dad is a literal reality-altering event because at his core, he's a good person. Case in point, Mark clearly wants to beat the shit out of this guy, but this whole season has been him trying to prove to himself that he's not like his father, so he initially keeps composure and tries to reason with Levy, reminding Angstrom that he was actually trying to save Mark the night of the accident, and that he knows that he's also a good person. Which just pisses Angstrom off more, as again, this guy has the collective consciousness of countless variants across the multiverse. Imagine all the memories that came flooding back from every single dimension in that moment. Every horrible act other versions of Mark committed. Actually, you don't have to imagine it, because these words trigger a slew of flashbacks. Angstrom remembers trying to save Invincible, only to recall the cruelty he faced at his hands in other universes. The memory of an Invincible with a black and yellow suit killing his son. The memory of Angstrom's wife ending up as collateral damage by an Invincible wearing a zip-up with no mask, only goggles. Gotta admit, this fit looks kinda cozy. Gotta be comfortable while decimating the world, I guess. We see Angstrom as a police officer, trying to gun down Invincible with his squadron, only for them to get murdered before his very eyes. In every other universe, any semblance of family he has is destroyed by Mark, which leads to a universe where he seems to be the sole survivor, laying low from the Grayson family. We see him essentially on death row, with Mark beheading a line of prisoners one by one. All of these horrific events help us sympathize with Angstrom and give us a better understanding of how warped his mind has become and why it feels impossible for him to back down from this position. He's carrying around too much anger, too much resentment, too much guilt, too much trauma. He's truly a broken man. He wants to make all of the Grayson family hurt as compensation for having his life torn apart over and over again. Debbie is revenge for his wife. Oliver is revenge for his son. This goes deeper than just Mark. It's such a great way to show and not tell. Because that's what the YouTubers are for, baby! Also, Steven Yeun is such a great voice actor. His performance of the other Marks really makes you want to punch them all in their douchey face and get killed immediately after. Considering how often we're rooting for and sympathizing with Mark, in part because of Yeun's performance, the way he's able to pivot from tragic hero to the most insufferable asshole you've met is truly remarkable. Get it? Remarkable? Oof, tough crowd. It doesn't take long for Mark to put his foot down and refuse to play Angstrom's game. So the madman starts to up the ante, throwing a knife right at Debbie and Oliver, baiting Mark to intercept the weapon so that he can be thrown to a universe where the zombie apocalypse has been long underway. Which feels like a nod towards The Walking Dead, another series co-created by Robert Kirkman. But as he's dealing with those shenanigans, Angstrom grows more unhinged as Debbie puts him in his place, revealing that Mama Grayson actually joins Mark and Nolan in a lot of other universes, so as far as he's concerned, he has beef with her as well. But Debbie doesn't back down. She asserts that in this universe, the world's a better place because of Mark and because of her. He wouldn't be such a good egg if she didn't raise him. She rightfully scolds Angstrom and points out that this is the one world where Mark is the hero and Angstrom is the villain, and he is booty blasted because of it. She gives him a much needed reality check, and yeah, he breaks her arm. Like, really breaks it. I was so fucking scared for Debbie here. He's all in her face with his stink-ass breath screaming, "Your son is the monster!" Like, bro, look at yourself! You look like you get paid for overthinking! There's a baby crying because of you, dude! Mark doesn't make babies cry, I know that's for sure. And once Mark gets the jump on Levy and he sees that Debbie is down an arm, oh, forget about it, Buster! Angstrom's life practically came to an end right there. Once they're out of the house, the boxing gloves are off. Angstrom decides he no longer needs to hold back, revealing his body has had some modifications that's made him stronger. But maybe not strong enough. Anyways, he declares he wanted to be the one to kill Mark with his own bare hands. Obviously, this man already had his priorities out of whack when he roped in Debbie and her adopted alien baby, but a detail that I really appreciate is the moment he's truly sunk to the same lows as the other Marks and Nolans without even realizing it. He always holds the innocent lives they've taken against them, yet he pushes two random civilians into portals, sending them to Lord knows where. and wherever they ended up, they likely have no chance of survival and definitely lack a way to return to their home dimension. He's ruining lives for the hell of it, just like the Marks and Nolans out in the multiverse. During this brawl, he starts punching Mark into different dimensions with each swing, which is pretty hard, I can't lie. And I just have to point out that the backdrop before their final destination is one identical to the mountains that Nolan and Mark fought on. If you want to call that a fight and not a reenactment of Dad coming home from work at 9 p.m. Nolan and Mark's clash is absolutely lingering in the back of Mark's head as he tries to pull his punches against Levy, so sneaking this in was pretty clever. Especially since what's about to go down is portrayed as a direct mirror to that scene. After settling on a world full of sand and rusted debris, the continual threats to Mark's family pushes him off the deep end. Mark finally stops holding back and unleashes a flurry of blows onto Angstrom Levy, hitting him over and over and over again until Levy draws his last breath. His face is completely smashed in and disfigured. Mark's body is painted with his blood. I love how primal this scene felt. When Angstrom tries to choke Mark only for him to bat away his hand like he's swatting a fly. Chills, man. Mark was locked in. And again, Stephen Ewan is a phenomenal voice actor. He makes this scene what it is. Can we roll a clip?
I'll never let anyone ever hurt my family!
Mark stares at his bloodstained hands just like Nolan did after beating down his son. Mark realizing that he finally took a life. Holding back vomit and failing to hold back tears. All he can do is
say the line, Bart!
I thought you were stronger.
Now I get the vibe that in the comic, this line just carried the surface level observation that Mark thought Angstrom was physically stronger. But in the show, there's definitely a double meaning that gives this line a lot more weight. As he's not just saying this because he thought Angstrom could handle these hands, but also because he believed that he himself was strong-willed enough to avoid taking someone else's life. He struggled so hard to not be like his dad, to not be a murderer, only to finally break and stoop to Nolan's level once his family was in danger. And it takes approximately 0 seconds for Mark to start tweaking. He immediately has to justify this murder to himself, to make it a sound and logical decision on his end. He threatened my family. He made me do it. I had to. Which is all true, but eventually, Mark forces himself to admit that just like with Vanessa, he wanted to kill Levy. He just didn't know if he was ready to bear the burden. He lost control and gave into what was for the longest time the worst thoughts he could have. I mean, damn bro, we don't need to be convinced as an audience. I think most of us would have put Levy 6 feet under if we saw our mom like that. But it is important to have this moment. Mark thinks taking a life, regardless of the situation, makes him as bad as his dad and the rest of Viltrum. That it makes him as bad as all the Marks who drove the Earth into ruin across the multiverse. But what he neglects to consider is that with both Anissa and Angstrom, he wanted to kill them so that they wouldn't kill anyone else, especially the people he loves. Meanwhile, Nolan, Krieg, Vidor, Thula, Steve Harvey, they all kill because they like it. It's second nature to them. They don't do it in self-defense, they do it for sport. On Viltrum, extermination is entertainment. Was he ruled by emotion? Sure, but that doesn't mean he did the wrong thing. Eventually, Mark realizes that he's stuck here, and yeah, how do you get out of this? What kind of ass pull do you need? What? The Guardians from the future opening a portal to rescue him in the hopes of creating a timeline that's better than the one about his presence? Yeah, why not have Adam Eve confess her love for him while we're at it?
I love you, Mark.
Okay, while this does feel a little too convenient, I like it because it hammers home what the show's been getting at all season. Contrary to what he believes, Mark does matter, and the Earth does need him. The planet becomes literal hell without him. Which also shows that Angstrom was wrong. He thought he would be doing the world a favor by getting rid of Invincible, but it would only plunge it into further darkness. The ramifications of his absence is so catastrophic that the Guardians dedicated years of their lives, what seems to be at least 2 decades, to getting him back. It's interesting that Robot clarifies they knew Mark would be stuck in this dimension if he injured or killed Angstrom Levy. Between this oddly specific dialogue and the Guardians leaving his body behind in this dimension, one could assume bro isn't dead yet. I mean, characters enduring traumatic situations to reach emotional breakthroughs only to later discover said situation wasn't as terrible as they perceived is kind of part of the course for the show, so I wouldn't be surprised. Mark also says he doesn't know how he would have survived if the future Guardians didn't come to his rescue, to which Robot responds that he did, he just wouldn't like what he had become. If we're just getting started with the multiverse shenanigans, then I imagine we'll get acquainted with that Mark during the Invincible War. Now, between the Mark and Eve moments in the last few episodes and future Eve's confession here, demanding that Mark tells his Eve how he feels as soon as possible, it definitely feels like the show is rushing into this romance a bit, but I'm sure it'll take another season for them to actually get together. Also, hey, looks like Rex does become the leader of the Guardians. Eventually. Sweet! I'm definitely picking up the comics after this episode because I'm always stressed when watching this show, not knowing who's going to live or die. Though they're clearly not afraid to deviate from the comics a bit, since Ray wasn't supposed to survive the mukbang, but still, I really didn't know if Debbie was going to pull through for a second. If it wasn't for the GDA showing up when they did, she might have just bled out right here. I mean, even Oliver's looking at her like, damn, Ma, you good? Also, I'm sorry, this is so off topic, but the size of Cecil's head here is killing me. He really got a lot on his mind. Like the season 1 finale, the first half is all about the action, while the second half deals with the aftermath, allowing us to cool down and explore where all the characters are at emotionally. And speaking of emotions, Viltrumites, man! I've called out the Viltrumites before for being giant hypocrites, chastising Nolan and Mark for their attachment to Earth and acting like they're diseased because of it, yet continually trying to give Nolan an out and showing mercy towards him. Last episode, Krieg tried to get him to rejoin the Empire, and since Nolan declined, now he wants to rough him up a bit more than necessary as a way of giving him the finger. He's butthurt his friend won't abandon his newfound morals. And one of the Viltrumites straight up says he was a fan of Nolan since he was a child, and he doesn't want to hurt him. Despite trying to come off as cold and calculated, they seem to be driven by emotion a bit more than they let on. It's just usually pride that's behind the wheel. Nolan runs into Alan in the hallway, Alan communicating telepathically that the plan worked, and that he came to bust Nolan out, setting the stage for season 3, which I assume will open with the big prison break. As soon as Mark returns to this dimension, he reunites with his mom at the hospital. Oh look, they have matching black eyes. Now that's what I call family bonding. Cecil tries to comfort Mark in his own, Cecil way by getting down to brass tacks, telling Mark he's not his father, and that this is a situation with a clear-cut good guy and bad guy, even if Mark begs to differ, knowing the pain Angstrom Levy endured at Mark's hands in different dimensions. But not this one, buddy! It feels very deliberate to have Mark and Cecil at odds, even in this situation. Tensions have been bubbling between the two for a while now, and I have no doubt season 3 will finally see things reach a boiling point before finally exploding. We also get a resolution to the surviving couples of the season. First, Rudy talks to Monster Girl, explaining that he's still adapting to human customs and is still socially awkward. He apologizes for his behavior getting in the way of their relationship, but at the same time, he is genuinely concerned for Monster Girl, and he's hurting because he's a problem solver, yet he feels like he's gotten pushed away and is becoming a problem himself. MG accepts his apology and expresses that she wants him to just treat her like a person and talk to her about topics other than her own problems. Take notes, boys. They're finally on the same page, and hey, they're going out on another date. Too bad I still find this pairing pretty creepy, and their spat this season only made it worse. I get they were both right and wrong at the same time. It's a common theme in their relationships this season, but I still find it hard to root for the man who put himself in the body of a robot and in the body of a teenage clone of his teammate because he thought his crush would find him more attractive. But I guess we're in it for the long haul, so I'll probably get used to it. But I won't like it. Elsewhere, Immortal goes to his cabin, finally taking a step back and going on vacation, only to discover Duplicate's alive. Aha, that one's a 0. I see what you did there, Kirkman. You're clever. Kate wanted to escape her superhero life, but struggled to part ways with Immortal. She didn't want to leave him behind too, but she knows him and the superhero world are a package deal. Yeah, I really don't have much to say about this other than I'm glad Kate survived, and I hope they take this in an interesting direction that makes the backtracking worthwhile. As Mark is going through the motions and grappling with the moral dilemma of taking another life, we have a classic Spider-Man moment as he watches Amber from afar, but decides to keep his distance, knowing he has to let her go because they're from 2 different worlds. He knows from this crazy-ass week that the stakes are way too high. He has to leave her alone. I just love this kind of trope. Star-crossed relationships will always hit the spot for me. But Mark's not the only one going through it, as when the Grayson family returns to a new and improved home, you can tell that they both hate having to maintain the facade of a normal life. having to constantly start over, while keeping that fresh start a secret from the rest of the world. This is yet another home of theirs that's been tainted by horrible memories, the consequences of the life they chose. Well, Mark is done living this lie. He's ready to quit college and fully immerse himself in the superhero lifestyle. He wants to get better, not stronger, better. He wants to improve himself mentally so he can never feel this low ever again. So that the next time someone he cares for is in danger, he can neutralize the situation without getting his hands dirty. But judging by the crazy shit that's happened so far in this show, that's a tough bar to set for himself. The season ends with even Mark finally having a talk. Well, talk might be a little bit too generous. She gives him company, but doesn't force any conversation out of Mark, as he doesn't want to open up about all the bullshit he's been through again. And he chickens out of telling her about his true feelings, so there's that. Right now, he's scarred by Amber and Debbie knocking on Death's door. As far as he's concerned, his loved ones got pretty messed up because of him. It's gonna take a while to fully process that what happened to them won't happen to Eve. That she's someone who not only belongs in this world, but thrives in this world. And besides, she's pretty OP. She's shown for 2 seasons straight, and a special, that she can take care of herself. But even if they aren't together romantically, it's clear that from here going forward, it's them against the universe. Not just Mark and Eve, but the rest of the Guardians. And so, the very long wait for season 3 begins. But not before a post-credits scene where Alan and Nolan are seen communicating through their cells. Nolan is initially cold towards Alan, dismissing the notion that they're on the same side, until Alan brings up Mark, that he saw Mark, which grabs Nolan's attention, but he's still not on board with Alan's plans, as Nolan wants Mark to be left out of his sins, feeling like he needs to atone without getting anyone else involved. Nolan admits that he's seen the error of his ways, that he no longer aligns with Viltrum's ideology. He's discovered empathy for other beings. He has shame and regret for treating them like shit and taking so many lives. I love how Alan is fed up with Nolan's pessimistic outlook, wanting to get through all the melodramatic BS, and skip to the part where they're punching Viltrumites. Of course, it wouldn't be a Nolan appearance without him having the audacity to say something egregious, leaving us on the ultimate mic drop as he admits that he misses his wife. This fucking guy. Like, I get it. I love this journey for him, actually. He never actually viewed Debbie as a pet. He was just trying to convince himself that he did because he thought it'd make it easier to sever his attachment from her when the time came to dominate Earth. He wanted to be immune to his own emotions, only to long for Debbie's presence once he's itching towards death. But from a surface level, it's so funny that this man dipped from Earth, knocked up another woman, wrecks that woman's planet, and then when that woman is probably dead because of her short lifespan, he's all,
Oh, I love my wife. I love my wife.
bro, she had a whole arc because you dipped. She's been trying to come to terms with everything, and you just know he's gonna throw in wretch in all of that progress the second he shows up on Earth, wanting things to be hunky-dory and hoping they can just sweep the past year or so under the rug, you know? But you're in for a rude awakening, buddy. Who am I kidding? She's probably gonna fold. With all that said, Invincible Season 2 was another phenomenal installment of television. It seems like Season 3 is going to up the ante, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a much more intense season. Season 2 felt like a bit of a cool down from Season 1, while still managing to elevate the show to new heights. Like the character writing got even better than it already was. But they made the conscious decision to dial back the scale when it came to the action. Like, the most brutal the season got was the Guardians vs. the Lizard League, yet compared to Season 1, it really wasn't that brutal, especially since everyone ended up surviving. I mean, they did in Season 1 as well, but still. So I imagine now they gotta crank it up a notch and raise the stakes dramatically in Season 3, furthering the character development while going all out on the carnage. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. Let's hope in 2025 and not 2026. But as always, these are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. For the comic readers in the house, was this episode everything you dreamed of and more? For the casual viewers like me, did this episode deliver, or were you left feeling unsatisfied? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, throw a like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.